Dear ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the 2022 International Open Seminar on Semiotics, a tribute to John Deely on the 5th anniversary of his passing. This seminar is a collaborative international open scientific initiative and a celebration that connects dozens of scholars and organizations. The sessions will run throughout all the year, so please stay tuned and follow the schedule or on our website. Today we propose to set about exploring the semiotics of contemporary architecture, and our guide through this topic will be Dr. Dragana Vasilski. It's our pleasure to host your lecture, Dr. Vasilski. Please allow me to say a few words in order to introduce you to our public. Dr. Dragana Vasilski is full-time professor and dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Urban Planning of the University Union Nikola Tesla in Belgrade, Serbia. Her work includes writing and research, architectural design, and teaching, the application of new methodologies, and the pursuit of investigations within an interdisciplinary approach. Her current fields of interests include interdisciplinary intersections between architecture and philosophy, architectural theory and history, arts and sciences, architectural design process, design studies, cultural studies, humanistic and natural sciences. Dr. Vasilski's scientific competence and success are reflected in more than 100 scientific papers. The peculiar field of her interest within topics related to contemporary architecture is architectural minimalism and an impact it has on people's lives. She uses semiotics as a research method to define, understand, and explain this contemporary aesthetic theme in architecture. Since 2018, Dr. Vasilski is a member of the executive board of the International Association for Semiotics of Space and Time, where she holds the position of Secretary General. Again, it's a pleasure to host your talk today. Please, Dr. Vasilski, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Now I will start my topic. Today I will talk about minimum, about minimalism, and about connection between minimalism and minimum and semiotics. Shall I? I'm sorry. Oh, that's it. Is it okay now? Thank you so much. My topic is minimum as a sign in contemporary architecture. Excuse me, how can I list this? I cannot list my presentation. Oh, it's okay. Introduction. Semiotic discourse on architecture. To quote Umberto Eco, we must study semiotic systems which, since they lead us to understand the world in a certain way, allow us to speak about it. Semiotics is a method to study the meanings of sign and therefore represents an interesting approach to analyzing sign systems like architecture. Minimum is one of the basic premises of minimalism in architecture. Using the method of semiotics, it is possible to explain not only the meaning of the term through a sense of minimum, but also minimalism as a global culture. Like a dialogue, logistic reasoning is convenient in sections that are pointed outwards. Analogous thought is metaphorical, sensual, and non-existent. It is not a discussion, but rather a guest for old photographs, a kind of internal monologue. Words are used to think logically. Analogous cognition is linked to memory. It is unspoken, unexpressed, and virtually unspoken in words. This is a text taken from the letter Carl Gustav Jung wrote to Sigmund Freud. Architecture is a method of thinking. Aristotle, Descartes, and Leibniz provide substantial foundation for Heidegger and for Descartes, based on the widely held belief. It is evident that architecture is compound in the words archi plus texture, where archi means art, aesthetics in philosophy, and where texture means engineering or technological revolution. Semiotics, or systems of communication, is used as a model of interpretation. If we interpret architecture today as a speech or semiotics, we can see it as a set of signs or premises that removes us from scientific or aesthetic knowledge while also bringing it closer to the essential, which is communication. Current inclination of architecture, which are influenced by a variety of circumstances, do not exclude it from transforming oneself as a result of the use, time, and change of the settings in which one finds oneself. Perhaps even today, architecture is more predisposed to polyglot than architecture from any other period, owing to the simple semiotic requirements to communicate with users tomorrow, rather than just the exclusive demands of investors. As a result, it is not restricted by the functional, as it reflects not only a functional totality, but also something far more, a sign in time and space that is essentially only a shell within which a certain amount of existence occurs. Communication with the user makes it pragmatic. Communication with the environment turns it into a semantic creation, or we reduce it to pure syntax, i.e., the interrelationships of the signs themselves, in the case architecture, which are in fact, that is, their look and space. Discourse in architecture is concerned with conditional possibilities, both within and beyond the settings, as well as within the architecture itself. There is no truth here, only diverse models of truth, which is what architecture is, or to put it another way, what is the solution to spatial conditions. Architecture's solution as the response that some symbolize the truth for a certain location is especially important since it places architecture in the semiotics plane of reading the spatials. The time of sign, as Susan Petrelli and Augusto Ponizio, is the last decade of the 20th century, is an introduction to 21st century architecture in which the sign is put as a major element, res utilitas, which resolves all previous historical debates in sign. As such, the sign exists as the essential level of the creator in his conflict as an intellectual tool for analyzing the underlying realities of existence, as said Thomas Sebeck. The sign is a means of marking that determines the basic existence. It has worth today, but we subconsciously see it in the distant future due to its own finality. We throw crumbs behind us, aware of our own finality, not only to find the path back, as in natural cyclicity, but also to leave trace of presence, if only for time, in the place where we once were. At the macro level, the task of architecture is no longer just to interact with the users and the nature in which it is implemented. Architecture now interacts in a higher dimension, in the space-time language dimension. In other words, in the dimension where it stands next to other science and communicates with them. Wanting to size the production of the meaning means wanting to seize the mysterious alchemy of our creative thoughts. It is questioning ourselves like thinking subject. It means questioning a process and not a result. It means questioning the process of the life in a circle going from destruction to regeneration. Semiotics is defined as a theory of forms which produce meaning. Architecture uses several system semiotics to produce meaning. It includes a complex whole of various space visual codes. Reading the sign of minimum. To quote Mice van der Rohe, architecture is the will on an epoch translated into space. If we take the definition of minimum from the dictionary, we can read minimum, Latin, what is the smallest, the tiniest, the lowest, the most insignificant, the smallest measure, the smallest value of a quantity, the smallest amount of something, the lowest degree of some quantity, as opposite to maximum. Note, meaning and interpretation of minimum in this lecture is seen as necessary and sufficient in terms of quality. It is seen as the essence. Essential and treasured items provide just enough personality. From my point of view, the concept of minimum and its definition from the dictionary as a widely held belief is the reason of all misunderstandings concerning minimalism. At the table 1, we can see minimum interpretation. Semiotics is used as a methodology for defining the minimum. If the basic compositional elements of architecture are space, surface, and form, then the minimum can be defined through the level of meaning. Emptiness, its zero dimension of space, horizontally, that is a surface, and form as an archetype or as a box. In relation to space, minimum is defined through a zero dimension of space and emptiness. Orientation towards the emptiness has always been an object of interest in both art and architecture, with a powerful symbolism and subjective experience. It reflects the desire to return to essential qualities and original state. The concept of emptiness requires a deeper understanding of space and human experience. Emptiness is the space between these things, but also the cavity that contained within many things. So focus is on making and interrelating something and nothing, dynamic and static, dark and light. It suggests both absence and present. Empty space, which means nothing built within, can still be permanent with the pursuit forces and filled with the density, which can be called the visual substance, as Arham did. Emptiness is a concept strongly rooted in minima. Minimalism in architecture contains the theme of emptiness, for which the concept of essence emerges as a leading creative tendency. In linguistic and Western philosophy codes, concepts of emptiness and essence could not stand together except as opposes. On the other hand, there is a strong connection between emptiness and essence in Eastern Buddhism, reaching the level of identification. In relation to surface area, minimum is defined through horizontal surface area. And housing the horizontal surfaces in order to delineate fluidity, elusiveness, and stability of architecture in achieving in such a way that floors and canopies become the primary elements of expression. Gideon wrote that Utzon everywhere feels a horizontal surface, a platform like the backbone of architecture composition in Greece, in the Middle East, in India. In relation to form, minimum is defined through pure form. that is archetype or box form. Basic regular geometric shapes representing architecture, the icon of a perfect order and the spiritual essence. The most relevant basic geometric shape in the architectonic terms is the box, that separating from the other and distinguishing oneself in the space, recognizing and affirms to be oneself and the soul being own. In the context of the dialectic relationship between form and corresponding space, solid and void, the state of perfect pure order could be considered as an internal manifestation, represented through an ideal box void, as empty inner immaterial volume, analog to the outer material form of the box. The analogy unifies a physical and the psychological experience of form. From the present to the absent, space underlies forms of interactions. The minimalism in architecture, as today's stream in architecture, is concerned with achieving an effort of perfect box-like architecture. It shows that the model of box form, which is a kind of modernism tradition, has not been exhausted yet, and still possesses the vitality to transform itself and respond to contemporary complex needs and thoughts. Based on a minimum interpretation and semiotics as a methodology for defining the minimum, we can make sign analysis of minimum. The basis species triad, which is also presented as a semiotic triangle, where sign consists of sign, binnacle, sense, and referent. Based of previous, the semiotic triangular sign analysis of minimum is made. And I will not bore you with all these elements. I have already spoken about the main, and this is a meaning of that, and the cultural landscape or referencing. Minimalism is designing sense of minimum. To quote Miles Outgrow, once again, architecture begins when two bricks are placed side by side. The word design comes from Latin and means literally the sign, i.e., take away the sign or the meaning. To design then is really the mental intention of trying to show, to explain the true meaning of content of something. When somebody is designing something, the intention is to explain the inner meaning of the thing. The architecture that does not transmit a symbolic message, it does not apply to anything outside itself, automatically gives priority to the immediate experience of the light and the material. And Hall's remark that light, texture, detail, and overlapping space constitute a meaning that is silent and stronger than any textual manipulation. I think that this is something very important for minimalism. Minimum, I already told that from my point of view, I will talk about minimum as a purity of essence. The idea of living architecture, wherein structures might have souls and involve with their occupants, has been offered as the minimal as the pure essence. By evaluating and comprehending the preferences and mood of the users rather than the performances and experience of the designer, buildings can have empathy for their users, support their mental status, boost their energy, assist them in increasing the level of the task performance, and optimize living spaces. Buildings with a soul are those whose designs allow the architect to specify the structural framework within which a building's behavior occurs and develops but not the specific behavior of the structure. Minimum implies a haptic design, about understanding the bodily experience of space and objects. It's a way of design thinking that incorporates all our senses. It is a world that's become predominantly visual and quantifiable. It seems the approach to design has become very monolateral. A haptic approach is also about touch, sound, smell, and taste. It's about trying to design spaces that evoke special feelings or determine certain behaviors, about emotions and how spaces make you feel. Essential, treasured items provide just enough personality. The essence of architecture corresponds to the essence of man. The discussion between Louis Kahn and Martin Heidegger about the search for the essence of man contains several cases. Heidegger determines that residence means existing and that man achieves that through constructions that respect the essence of housing. Kahn proposes a return to the origin in order to find common characteristics of human existence, its institutions and thought. Their external features, he presents his architecture as a response to man. Both of them brought the man into crisis at that moment. Heidegger invites us to learn once again how to create, while Kant believes that we should reprogram the institutions in search of a new society. Making a building with what can be called a functioning spirit is what minimalism in architecture signifies, can engage with the user in intellectual conversations. Layers of minimum I will explain in next, exterior and interior as an artifact, the second one value, and the third one essence or identity. Layers of minimum, the first one is exterior and interior and artifact. The contrast from the abstract to the real is comparable to the idea of layers in architecture set by Nikolai Hartmann. The layered architecture he has defined hierarchically from the outside, obvious and objectively present, to the interior as the firstly observed inaccessible layers. According to him, there are three outer layers. The first one is final composition, most clearly represented in the base. The second one is a spatial composition. It's proportional, the weight distribution, or what is done to viewer and its impression. And the third one is dynamic composition, mastering the matter and exploration of its autonomous laws. It is not very obviously, as are in other art forms, that architecture in general has inner layers. Inner layers, although invisible, represent the inherent structures of the form and contain the conditioning factors for all of its external manifestations. One can distinguish between three inner layers of an architecture structure. Of course, they're not present in every architecture work. However, they contain a certain order, and the deeper layer never occurs without a shallow one. The first one is soul of the meaning in the solution of practical task. The deepest layer represents a general ideological conception found solution. The second one, the entire expression of parts and of whole, which is based on the second and the third outer layer of spatial and dynamic compositions. This is a manifestation of the current actual preferences, the construction style related to the spirit of the age. Expressing the will to live in all its form, mostly unconscious, but still in some oppositions in the practical purpose, expressing something impractical, one idea. This is the important inner layer where individual authorial concepts are contained with the sublimate previous levels of existence and operationalizing the ideological concept and preferences by concrete proposals and solutions. The inner layers are analog to the manifesting levels of spiritual being in the sense that they are arranged hierarchically according to their generality and scope where rule exists. That what is low veers that what is high. Interior of box form, due its sufficient capacity, fractionally opens up infinite possibilities for internal relations. In managing certain principles of order enables this now complicated inner frame to be still observed as a nice, unfilled whole and thus corresponded to an order of the outer expression of box form. The second layer of minimum is value. Norman Foster said that quality is an attitude of mind. The emergence of minimalism, the halter of the phenomenological concept of architecture, is explained as resistance to materialistic values of contemporary society, wrote Bertoni. Unlike Norbert Schultz's request for figurative architecture, for minimalist, formalistically uncluttered space is actually the condition for the phenomenological experience. Herein lies the essence of minimalist relations towards modernism. Minimalists believe that modernist inhumanity is not a matter of form, but a problem of the whole modernist approach. The argument is that a simple form does not need to be sterile if it is made from a warm and natural materials. Minimum is the value with lyric quality. Barragan holds a similar point of view, what is enforced by his statement. I believe in an emotional architecture. It is very important for humankind that architecture should have by its beauty. There are many equally valid technical solutions to a problem. The one which offers the user a message of beauty and emotion, that one is architecture. So the statement on a subject of the intellect in architecture has been given by Friedrich Nietzsche. When I see what kind of house you designed, I'll know what kind of music you listen to. The reason is a fact that the most understandable language is not just words, but the tone, volume, modulation, tempo of pronouncing a series of words. In short, music that is beyond words, the person, behind the passion, all the things that cannot be written. The reason is our emotion. Minimalism, as isms, runs a series of distinguished and undeniable reveals, and its complexity and its ability confounding itself as a thoughtful process. The building itself has never been poetic, wrote Peter Tamter. The only thing I can do is to possess those delicate qualities that allows us to provide special moments to understand something that has never before been understood. And one quote of Brigitte Kold: spirituality as well as beauty is created or comes to life when the constitutes of architecture, structure and form and space and light colors, and materials interact as a piece of art, communicating with the intellect, the emotions, the spirit, and the senses. As you see from those distinguish the beautiful, true, and good are also interrelated in architecture with the sentience, aesthetic, and vigorous quality. On this diagram, we can see the components that create the sense of minimum as a visible quality of space. Minimum demands a meaning of representation that allows a reading of the continuity of spatial experience that gives us a sense of minimum as a visible quality of space. The third layer of minimum is essence or identity. From the Vitruvian tide to offer firmness, commodity, and delight, the searching for answer to the ever-present question, what is the essence of architecture, lead us towards the relationship between the manifestation of architectural ideas and how architecture is experienced. Architecture today is irrevocable plural, and many critics view architecture very differently. The greatest charm of minimalism is that searching for the essence allows the basic elements to come into play. Search for the essence leads effectively into the stunning result. The new technological reality, which enables the overlap of different perceptions, contributes to the creation of new relationships and brings up the minimalism. The searching for the essence in contemporary architecture, the irrevocable minimum that we call silence, specify how the usefulness lies not only in the act of removal, but in the value of the what's left, i.e. reflexive regression of architectural effort. And sensational and treasured items provide just enough personality. Silence, or the essence of the irrevocable minimum. There is incommensurability between essence and facts, and one who begins with research with facts will never be able to find the essence, wrote Sartre. I will quote this part from Gaston Bachelard, a French philosopher, well known by his contribution in the fields of poetry and philosophy of science, who wrote, "We are exploring only a thin layer of images at the time of their formation. No doubt, the most delicate images can reveal profound flicker, but it would be necessary to explore other styles to come to the metaphors of other worlds of our sensory life, particularly to express how silence acts simultaneously on human time in human speech. The human being world requires a large book. The book has been written. You need to read A World of Silence by Max Picard." Cicero, Quintilian, and Seneca emphasized that a good speaker could not only be able to speak convincingly, but also to be silent effectively, recognizing the power of silence and the unspoken, a rhetorical tool capable of amplifying the influence of the message. The concept of silent speciality as architectural proposition carries particular importance in relation to the context in which it emerges. Modern mass and commodity culture, consumerism, crowds, and overpopulations in cities. Palasma believes that architecture must maintain and define silence. Hall also thinks that architecture, with its silence, speciality, and tactile materiality, can reintroduce essential values to human experience. On this table, it is presented silence through multiple patterns of meaning based on example. We have here some authors, just like Tadao Ando, Rudolf Otto, Johanni Persner, Benedict Peter Zamda, Louis Kahn, Rudolf Otto, once again, and Louis Bergen. And this is something from my writings. Silence is more subject of sharpened sensibility developed on the basis of taste from the culture. Sensitivity is a philosophical category related to issue of meaning, a sort of spiritual instrument with which we feel word as a kind of specific flavor of existence. These criteria are designed and are sophisticated sensibility indicators as they determine the quality of wine, tea taste, or fragrance of perfumes. Silence is not made from a book and does not start from solving practical issues, but from the kind of feeling that there must exist a world within the world. Silence is the essence of minimum. The experience of silence within us is achieved through emotions of visual identity of minimum. The primary elements of minimum in architecture include space, material, and light, and an intense physical, visual, and tactile relationship with the user. Experience of silence within us means an ambiguous space and tranquility. Material using texture and light as a detail provides movement. Light, by experimentation of its qualities, becomes a space defining factor for which a sense of spatial depth is brought into presence. Purity of essence in architecture means creating a building with what can be described as a functional soul, can engage with the user in intellectual conversation. Building can have empathy for the users, support their mental status, enhance their energy, help them increase the level of their task performance, and optimize living. Soulful buildings where an architect can put the structural frame in which a building behavior happens and evolves within, but does not decide about the precise behavior of the building. In this world, there is no objectivity without subjectivity, wrote Moran. We can talk about the concept of tacit knowledge. The idea of tacit knowledge is understood as implied without being stated. One of the fundamental assumptions in making is that the sensed conditions of different experience and the knowledge acquired by means of bodily engagement are assimilated as a tacit, implicit, and unoffendable. The term tacit comes from the Latin tacitus, means silent, from tacere, to be silent. Conclusion. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but seeing with new eyes. Marcel Proust. Current research introduces an effective method for persuading and recognizing the architectural concepts, especially minimum concepts. This method, which is named the semiotic approach, results from using the theory and method of semiotics in linguistics. In a famous dialogue with Phaedrus, Socrates asks about the characteristics of a good speech and concludes that the speech is soul guidance with the logos. If language and thought develop in mutual unity, in minimalism will matter the relationship of linguistic and its expressive power, the term, defined by the study of what we call the language of science. The message as the part of the architecture can be shown through different aspects of the architecture, which become the means of communication. This is a set of intentions that are realized in the totality of experience as something in the air, as the latent tension, poetics, purpose, usefulness, spirituality, identity, the phenomenon. Minimum is a spatial haiku. Pure expression can occur only when the communication is stopped, wrote Derrida. This is a spatial language of reduced syntax and compound of refined metaphor. It is a persistent quality for purity, the search for the dignity of silence as a presence, for the destiny of space, for the density, of space, for borderless space where silence speaks for itself. The emptiness of space is equivalent to the emptiness of spirit as a state that does not cling to anything in which we live fully in the present moment. This is reduced language that expresses the essence of architecture and corresponding to an age marked by electronic communication. The authentic Latin phrase or the mutata resugnocam can be translated to transformed, I will rise again unchanged, could also pertain to minimum. This is an architecture that inspires deep thoughts about the world around us and our places within. As Rilke said, the world is large, but within us it is a deep. Minimum teaches us about what it is possible to do by architecture, and it teaches us to find ourselves and make the world a pleasant place to live. Every day we have to think again about the same terms, to quote Martin Heidegger. One of the notions we have to think in everyday life about is minimum. At least, to see something means first to know something. Thank you very much for your attention. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vasilski, for this inspiring talk. It was extremely interesting to follow your lecture. I would like to announce to our audience on YouTube that we will be closing the broadcast now, but here on Zoom the session will continue so that everyone who is interested can ask the questions or make remarks and share some thoughts.